So, Natasha, curious for your reaction to the board's decision and description there that the rules are a shambles, knowing that basically the board upheld Facebook's decision, but also kicked the can down the road, and Facebook's going to have to decide again whether to leave the ban on President Trump in place 6 months from now.
Well, I think that's exactly the point. They kicked the can down the road. And when you think about, now in reaction to kicking that can down the road, you have Republicans once again calling for the breakup of Facebook. But in fact, that's an area where Republicans and Democrats agree, as we know. And so, when I look at this, I look at it from the perspective as an investor and try to address the root cause of why content on Facebook is so problematic versus the Supreme Court or the Oversight Board, which appears to me to be a Bandaid solution where you've already created the problem and then you're trying to address it at the end of the pipe. So, we look at Facebook and Facebook is too big and it's proven that it cannot effectively manage a platform with 3.4 billion users between all of its platforms. Two, its ad revenue is driven by algorithms, and this gets to the root cause, that are designed to propagate the most provocative content. So that drives, when you see hate speech, when you see disinformation about the elections, those algorithms are driving that provocative content and creating public policy risk in the meantime. And then three, the company is poorly governed. And we've been saying this for a long time. And it's not just because Zuckerberg is the CEO and the chair of the board, and which doesn't make sense from a governance standpoint, but we really think that the expertise that is necessary for this company is absent from the board, which is a human and civil rights expert on the actual board. So, we're asking again for that this spring at the annual meeting. So what you get here with the Oversight Committee is this, they end up tossing around the political hot potato of whether Trump can come back on the platform or not. And I just don't think that's where we need to be.
Meantime, you have 44 attorneys general urging Mark Zuckerberg not to release a version of Instagram for kids. This is something that they had now announced they were planning to do earlier this year. Got a mixed reaction. What's your reaction to that reaction? I wonder, is this cool or is this a parent's worst nightmare?
Oh my God. I mean, I'm a mother of a 10 and an 8-year-old, and I'm constantly trying to get them away from screens, for one thing, because it's not good for them. And I don't think anybody has seen any data that shows that social media use improves the well-being of children, the emotional well-being of children, certainly not for teenagers, where we know it sets them up for predation, it sets them up for bullying, it sets them up for anxiety, for increased suicides. So when I look at what's happening here, I think, well, why is Facebook doing this? Outside, obviously there's a profit motive, but given how poorly it has upheld its own terms of service on its main platforms, which are made for adults, I'm just surprised that they would even foray into this area, because there's so much public policy risk, headline risk when it comes to children and the abuse that they can face online.
Meantime, Natasha, we are doing this big special on the technology, biotechnology ecosystem in Boston and how that's grown, especially in light of the pandemic, where you have Pfizer and Moderna both headquartered in Boston. You are based in Boston. Talk to us about how the recovery is going from your perspective there, and where you see potentially unequal recovery happening.
Well, I think Boston's been leading. I think New England has been leading, outside of the fact that we have this biotech engine, Moderna and Pfizer being the best examples of that. Our population has been less vaccine hesitant. So you've got, over 60% of folks having received already their first vaccine dose. That's going to be a big positive going into this fall, and allow colleges to stay open, which is a big driver of the economy here in Boston, which is a huge education hub. When I look at the pandemic and how folks have reacted here and elsewhere across the country, but when I think about here, and having to work remotely this year, I used to have a 3-hour commute. So, and if you know anything about commuting in Boston, it's the worst. It's literally the worst traffic in the United States because those roads were designed for horse and buggies. There's not a lot of space for new infrastructure. So if you can effectively go forward and remove the constraint of everybody needing to commute, then actually you increase headroom for growth in Boston, which I think is great.